Welcome to this special coverage. Today, we delve into a major development in the Middle East as Israel launches a series of airstrikes targeting Houthi military infrastructure in Yemen. This operation, conducted in coordination with the United States and Britain, marks a significant escalation in a conflict that has already destabilized the region and drawn international attention. Israel has launched airstrikes targeting Houthi military sites in Yemen, focusing on the Haziz power station and key port infrastructure. These strikes aim to counter Houthi missile and drone attacks on Israeli territory, which have escalated in recent months. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has vowed to continue responding forcibly to threats against Israel's security. The airstrikes have disrupted key energy and port facilities used by the Houthis, with reports of significant damage. The attacks have raised concerns about civilian casualties and disruptions to humanitarian aid. The United Nations has called for urgent measures to protect civilians and ensure the delivery of critical assistance in Yemen amid the heightened violence. The Houthis have condemned the airstrikes, claiming their missile and drone strikes highlight Israel's inability to fully defend its territory. They described their actions as retaliation for Israeli aggression, vowing to continue operations. The conflict shows no signs of de-escalation as both sides maintain their positions. Houthi-affiliated media have reported around 30 joint airstrikes by Israeli, American, and British forces targeting areas in Sana'a and Hodeidah, including the Haziz power station. That came as Israeli media confirmed this as the first coordinated strike between Israel and the US-led coalition against Houthi targets in Yemen, part of Israel's strategy to counter Houthi influence in the region. Our guest today is Abu Bakr Bazib, president of the European Polling Center. Welcome, sir, to this segment. And first off, let me start by asking you, what messages is Israel aiming to send by pursuing these airstrikes on the Houthi targets in Yemen in coordination with US and British forces for the first time?
Israel is trying to show the world that it is the one that is protecting and capable of hitting the strategy of the Iranian arms in the region. Israel is trying to overcome the idea that it can hit the nearby geopolitical depth to hit the further depth and to go 2,000 kilometers away to hit the Houthi positions in the south of the Arabian Peninsula. So Israel is trying to show the world that it is breaching peace and as well capable of doing this. This reflects the internal conflict inside Israel and its inability to find a real settlement for the conflict in Gaza for the last 15 months.
On the other hand, we have the Houthi retaliating by launching missiles and drone attacks. How significant is the threat posed by the Houthis on Israel's security?
We need to know that Israel naturally is attacking, and the Houthi militias are actually one of the arms of Iran to hit the Arab national security. So after what happened in Syria and after what happened in Lebanon and the decline of militias in Iraq, Iran does not have any more arms to create chaos in the region except the Houthis. That's why Iran is trying to tell the world that it is still capable of disrupting the situation in the region by disrupting the maritime navigation and disrupting the geopolitics in the region. So Iran wants to send that message. The Houthi militias don't have real interest or real objective to hit the depth of Israel except to convey the influence and domination of Iran in the region. Houthis don't have anything to lose, so they are trying to tell the world that Iran still has capable arms to hit Israel.
So, sir, you've mentioned that the Houthis are the only remaining arm of Iran. And from here, I would like to ask you, how do you assess the Houthis' military capabilities?
The Houthi capabilities now, no one can estimate them, but for sure, the Houthis have got a huge number of drones and maybe tens of missiles. But I believe that the huge area of the Yemeni coast, which is 2,500 kilometers, there could be a lot of smuggling happening. In addition to the presence of Iranian experts inside Yemen, some international reports said that there are experts from the Revolutionary Guards of Iran present in Sana'a, and they are the ones who are doing this targeting of the depth of Israel. And regarding the attacking also of the maritime navigation and Bab el-Mandab construction, the Houthis on the technical military level don't have these very advanced capabilities. If they have it, they use it inside Yemen to attack Yemenis or attack certain places inside Yemen. This is the real conflict that the Yemenis are seeing. Israel, United States, and Britain are attacking the infrastructure of the Yemenis, water, electricity, and infrastructure, and the Houthis are doing the same. They are hitting the depth of Yemen. Some days ago, they hit some areas in the center of Yemen. So there is a humanitarian crisis for the Yemenis because of this targeting of the Yemenis by the international coalition and the Houthis inside.
Now, sir, according to the Jerusalem Post, reference to the coordinated attack between Israel and Britain and the United States, each party struck different locations in Yemen. What are the strategic objectives behind this? How do you interpret this exactly?
Naturally, the UK, Israel, and US only. It is a coalition of 19 countries. Some of them are providing military weapons, and some are providing intel information, and some have military presence. There are 19 countries that are present in the Bab el-Mandab construction attacking the Houthis. The Houthis as non-state actors and as extreme non-state actors like Qaeda, like ISIS, like Taliban in Afghanistan, they are making use of the difficult terrain, the difficult geography of Yemen, and moving from one place to another. They don't have stable, fixed platforms for missiles. It's moving everywhere. They don't have certain military objectives that can be hit. That's why Yemen is under siege, and this siege is affecting the Yemeni people. Now the coordination in attacking the Yemeni places, this didn't happen in Beirut, this didn't happen in Syria, didn't happen in Gaza. It was only Israel there. But now the skies of Yemen are targeted by many countries, and this is confirming that the Houthi militias are committing political suicide and pushing Yemen towards political suicide on the military and political levels.
Now, looking at the wider picture, how do these strikes fit within the broader context of regional stability in the Middle East?
Unless Israel stops its war, unless Israel as an occupation state stop the genocide in Gaza, we cannot speak about any stability in the region. The presence of Israel in its continued war since October 2023 in Gaza, and then hitting the infrastructure of Beirut and hitting Syria and hitting Yemen, the Israelis are just taking the Yemeni militias as a pretext, because the militias in Yemen are doing the same chaos Israel is doing. Unless war is not stopped in Gaza, there would not be any stability in the region. This is one of the key points that we can point now. The region will remain pregnant with a lot of potential developments. And one of the main agendas of Trump, who will be in office within days, he will be in the White House, and he will be handling a number of economic crises and a number of wars in the world. These wars and crises are intermixed together, and this requires some international intervention because there is instability all over. The impact of the Ukrainian-Russian war is in Gaza and is present also in the Red Sea. All these interlacements would require a foreign or a proxy war from foreign parties, but this will not lead to stability in the short term, at least.
Now, sir, let's assess the impact of this targeting. What are the implications of targeting critical infrastructure such as power stations and ports for Yemen's economy and civilian population?
This is a very important question, but let me take you a few years back. In 2019, the legitimate forces of Yemen, supported by the Arab Alliance, to liberate the places controlled by the Houthis in order to secure the maritime navigation and the international navigation. But the West did not understand the gravity of the Houthis by then, and the West pressured the legitimacy forces, and they stopped and did not liberate these areas. And these areas now are used by Houthis to threaten the international navigation and the international stability. There was a justification saying the main artery for Yemen leads to humanitarian crisis. The Houthis are not affected. The Yemeni people are the ones affected. They don't have much of infrastructure that can support them. What is left of water and electricity generators is very few. And the attack on Hodeidah port is also affecting the Yemeni people. It is hitting on the humanitarian and food security of the Yemenis and the Yemeni economy, but Houthis are not affected. So these targets are still dangerous and affecting the ordinary Yemeni citizen, who is today, according to international reports, is 85% of Yemenis are under poverty line now.
Yes, sir. Building on the humanitarian crisis you were talking about, what challenges do humanitarian organizations face in responding to this escalation?
This is another problematic, unfortunately. Over the previous month, the Houthi militias arrested all the humanitarian international organizations operating in Yemen and stopping and paralyzing their work in Yemen. And this leads to an accumulation of the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. There are no regional or international associations working on humanitarian issues, especially in the areas controlled by the Houthis. It is small in geography but with dense population and in dire need to humanitarian and food assistance. 380 regional, local and international organizations are totally closed, and most of their leaders are arrested and prevented from working in Yemen. Over the last 9 years in Yemen, there wasn't any ability for the ordinary citizens to live, as the international reports have said that many people in Yemen are only living on humanitarian aid. So you can see the great humanitarian crisis in Yemen. No humanitarian aid. Houthis are besieging the cities inside Yemen, attacking them, and the international coalition is attacking what's left of the Yemeni infrastructure. And we are in the middle of the winter, and this gravely affects the vast cold areas in Yemen. It's a great humanitarian crisis in Yemen, unlike any other, but another one is also in Yemen. There should be a position about it. There should be an action about it. There should be a pressure on the Houthi militias, but in Tehran, not in Sana'a.
Now, sir, I would like for you to stay with me as I read this breaking news. Israel has conducted airstrikes on Houthi military targets in Yemen, hitting sites in Sana'a's Haziz power station, which Israel claims powers Houthi military operations, as well as military infrastructure in the ports of Hodeidah and Ras Isa. The National has reported that Houthis confirmed multiple strikes in Sana'a and Hodeidah, with British security from Ambri reporting ongoing air raids across Houthi-controlled regions. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu stated the Houthis will continue to pay a heavy price for their aggression. The strikes reflect heightened tensions, with Israel emphasizing it will not tolerate threats from the Houthis in the region. Now back to you, sir. Mr. Abu Bakr, thank you for staying with us. And now let me ask you, from a political perspective in Yemen, how might these airstrikes affect the balance of power within Yemen itself?
Balance of power inside Yemen is imbalanced for a very long time. The Houthis have inherited actually the military arsenal of the Yemeni Republic in 2014. So the Houthis managed to own all the legacy of the Yemeni military arsenal. Hundreds of missiles. That was the equipment of the Republic of the Yemeni Republic Army. Now the imbalance of power is for the favor of the Houthis. The legitimate government cannot rebuild its military might because of economic problems, embargo on selling weapons to it, and so Houthis will continue to be the upper hand, not because they are a militia, but because of the supply from Iran and from the Yemeni coast. The supply is open for the Houthis and more advanced than any other part. Yemen needs a real approach in speaking with the legitimate government and creating a real alliance with the legitimate government so as it would be able to do something so as we can get to some stability in the region. It's not about what's happening in Gaza. What's happening in Gaza is a genocide. Israel should comply to the international legitimacy. But what the Houthis are doing is threatening the Arab national security and threatening the Yemeni people. So the disruption of the international navigation is leading to an impairment of the economy of the region. Wars are open in Gaza, Sudan, and Yemen. This all leads to attacking the depth of the Arab national security, which we need an approach to deal with it, and we need to establish at least an initial stability in the region.
Now, sir, reference to the already open fronts Israel is waging war on the region, what role does Yemen's strategic location play in the unfolding conflict?
Naturally, the strategic location of Yemen is essential. It is Bab el-Mandab is an essential crossing for all the international trade. It's one of the passages of the oil tankers in the world. So those who come from East Asia to the west of the world, to the west and everywhere, they have to go through this point. And many economic reports have talked about the impact of this disruption of navigation. It is not only about a military alliance in the region, but there are many Chinese, Indian, Turkish bases in these areas by vessels and stable bases in the Horn of Africa, all trying to find some security to the international navigation and international trade and to deter the disruption of trade. There is something like 9% to 60% of the global trade moving through this crossing. It affects the trade, it affects the Suez Canal and all. So any disruption of security in this region affects the whole world and the global economy. The insurance is still very high. The value of the oil, the price of oil is high because of all these costs. there should be stability. And stability happens with two things: ending the genocide war in Gaza and finding peace and settlement between Arabs and Israel, and ending the disruption of the Iranian arms to the region's stability. After Iran is limited in Syria and Lebanon, and after the militias in Iraq are limited, the Houthi militias should be also controlled and limited, because they harm the Arab regional and international interests.
Now, sir, only a few days left for Trump's return to the White House. And from here, I would like to ask you, how do you interpret the timing of this coordinated strike before Trump's return to office?
Trump had a very clear position regarding the Houthis. Before the end of his term, he categorized Houthis as #1 terrorists, and he worked to end any ability and qualification of the Houthis. But still, when the Biden administration came, they withdrew the idea that Houthis are terrorist organization, and this is something that is going to be dealt with. There will be two wars that Trump needs to work upon what's happening in them. Based on his statements, based on his presidential program, he will work on the Ukrainian-Russian war and the war on Gaza. The war on Gaza is not separated from what Tehran is doing as creating chaos through its arms in the region. But there is some kind of movement of everything. So a new president is elected in Lebanon. That's a step forward towards stability there. The situation in Syria is progressing towards engagement of all into a political process. So I believe that the Trump agenda would be burdened and heavy with a lot of details that he has to handle. So he has a very heavy internal agenda inside the US, but he has also a heavier one on the global level. So I believe the world now is waiting for Trump to go into the Oval Office and to see how Trump will be prioritizing the crisis in the world, and what's happening in the Middle East is part of this. Especially that the Middle East
sorry for interrupting you here, but speaking of Trump's agenda, do you think that establishing peace in the Middle East will be among his priorities?
He spoke about that many times, but I believe that Trump also has the idea of an imbalance in his judgment, because he cares for Israel more than the interests of the whole region. So this imbalanced way of seeing things by Trump will be very much for the favor of Israel, which will not provide peace, not even to Israel. So we need the Arab region to have real stability, and stability cannot be created except by establishing a Palestinian state. Would one of the priorities of Trump is to convince his allies in Tel Aviv to accept a Palestinian state that would have sovereignty and that would get the region into a relative stability? I think this is not a priority for Trump. Trump will favor his strategic partner, Israel, and make it more of an upper hand, and this will not lead to a real peace and genuine peace in the region on with the Arab countries. Not having solution and a resolution of the Palestinian issue is one of the reasons of the disruption in the region and the external interventions by regional parties, be it Iran, Israel, Turkey, or others, who sometimes would have different objectives from those of the Arab interests and different orientations other than having a real, genuine Arab national security.
Now, sir, back to the Houthis' military capabilities. How do you view the Houthis' capability to sustain their military actions following these strikes?
The Houthis are naturally a militia that works like mafia or gangs. their movement, their supplies, their military arsenal makes them higher than the idea of being confronted with ordinary armies. So, because the Houthis remain in difficult terrain, makes them one step ahead. But still, there is a number of political and military approaches that can limit the capabilities of Houthis. It should be by strengthening the internal Yemeni front, having a legitimate government in Yemen that can put all its control on all territories of Yemen is one of the keys that will lead to stability in the region on the geopolitical level and on the economic level by securing the international navigation areas. Houthis have military capabilities, but the approaches of dealing with them now does not limit their capabilities. There should be other approaches on the ground. There should be political capabilities. And the key thing about the Houthis is the Iranian experts, how to pressure Tehran to calm the front of Sana'a. This could be one of the priorities of Trump in the future. He has a solid position towards Tehran, so he should go in line with the Arab orientations, because all the Arab world and all the Arab states wants peace everywhere, with Israel, with Iran, and with the world. But with the grave interventions of Iran in the Arab countries, it is the one that imposed on Arabs to build alliances against the influence of Iran in Yemen, Syria, and Lebanon, and elsewhere.
Thank you, Mr. Bazib, for joining us and for sharing your valuable perspective. Thank you so much for being with us and for all the information you provided us with. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of our special coverage. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more updates on Q News.